Now, what was interesting is that many of these things started to suggest to us small changes. We experimented. We would do some things that would fail. We would do other things that were wildly successful. This outdoor chess set, which cost us, I don't know, $800 or something, was so popular we ended up deciding to put it permanently in the street. And so it started to suggest to us things that were successful that we could then put in as a permanent feature within the space. We ran a children's program called Gorf, who was a mythical figure. I won't explain all the background of this other than what we got was kids doing treasure hunts through the street and visiting various stores. Now, one of the principles of placemaking, which I mentioned yesterday to a group of people, was that if you can get people to stay for twice as long in the public domain, the street or the space will look twice as full without even attracting an extra customer. Now, the one thing we know about public space that attracts people and makes it feel vibrant is the presence of people. So if I can show you a way of making your street twice as full of people without even attracting any extra people, that's a pretty good strategy, isn't it? And the strategy is to slow people down. Often we think of footpaths as a form of transport for people on legs. We're so preoccupied with this idea of moving people around that we forget that the basic role or one of the basic roles on the footpath should be slowing people down, and so creating what I call linger nodes. And unless you can identify the linger nodes along a street, it's not going to work as a public space. And so what we were doing with this was creating linger nodes on this treasure hunt where the kids would play, the adults would sit down and have a chat. Now, what was really, really interesting about this was that we were only getting about 120 families on a Saturday morning doing the treasure hunt, and yet it made a phenomenal difference in the feel of the street. And one of the tricks to that was that they were spending all Saturday morning in the street, or a great portion of the Saturday morning, doing this treasure hunt. So the social programs that you create are the things that can start to rewrite the scripts about how people relate to the street. As a result of Lounging on High and this program, people began to relate to the space in a very, very different psychological way than what they had done previously. The golf program also was involved a school program. This was so popular that even 12 months after the event, if I was walking down the street and a group of kids were coming towards me, they'd all high-five me because I was the only one who'd ever talked to Gorf. Gorf was a, if we go back, this door that Gorf lived behind, I could go down at 8 o'clock at night some nights, and there'd be a whole family down there with the kids knocking on the door and talking to Gorf through the door. It was a phenomenon. We got over 3,000 entries in the golf competition, which was huge. Okay. Now, and I don't need to tell you that one of the outcomes of this was that families discovered shops that they didn't know existed, because the treasure hunt featured 5 merchants every Saturday morning, and they had to go and find these merchants, and so people were discovering shops that they didn't even know were there previously. So there was other underlying reasons as well. Economic development. Now, I find most merchants are absolutely stuck on essentials-only shopping. What we tried to explain to the merchants in High Street was that, in fact, there are 4 segments within the shopping market. There's your intentional shopper. These are the people who've got a shopping list and know exactly what they've come to buy, and they make a purposeful trip to the shopping centre to buy something. This is the shopper that most merchants are focused on. This is why they want a parking space right outside their shop, because essential shoppers are people who are on a utilitarian task, and it needs to be as efficient as possible. You with me? Leisure shoppers. Does anybody know what a leisure shopper is? Ah, all the women put up their hands. The men go, yes, I know what that is. This is a growing sector of the market, and in Europe, and the studies I've read are years old now, well over half of the shopping dollars come from leisure shoppers, people who are there for the pleasure, not for out of a sense of duty. We'll come back to that in a moment. Your social and cultural visitors, these are the people who've decided to meet a friend, a social exchange at a coffee shop, go to the library, see some artwork, or just hang out to be around other people. There are, if you go to any great public space, you will see people who are just sitting out in the public domain just to be around other people. They want the feeling of connection to other people. And over here we have tourists. Now, the interesting thing about leisure shoppers, social and cultural visitors and tourists is that what they rely on for being attracted to a space to do their leisure shopping or for their cultural and social visit is the quality of the experience that they are going to have within that space. It's not for the shopping per se, but for the total experience. Summarised, years ago I took a photograph of a couple sitting outside of a Sydney cafe in the suburbs. And as I looked at that photo in the years afterwards, I started telling myself a story about this young couple that were in the photograph, because right beside them there was a post, and it had their two bikes leaning up against the post, and they were very animatedly engaged in a conversation with the waiter. And I imagined them that morning, it was a sunny morning, they got up and they said, let's ride down to Joe's cafe for a coffee, and they got the bikes out, and as they rode out, their next door neighbour was out doing some gardening, and he said hello to them, and they had a little bit of a conversation, and they rode up the street in the sun, and they got to the cafe, and there's a post there for them to lean their bikes against, and then they know the waiter, so again they have another exchange, and then they get on their bikes and they might have gone somewhere else, and eventually that afternoon they get home. Now, for that couple, the buying of the coffee on that trip was part of a seamless experience. They did not say, let's go and help Joe out and buy a coffee. It was the totality of the experience, what I call the experience envelope, in which the commercial exchange happened. And it's easy to see that the bigger you make an experience envelope, the more likely there are to be commercial exchanges within that envelope. What we get stuck on, and what merchants get stuck on, is selling the product rather than creating the envelope in which the sale is going to happen automatically. Our job is to build a memorable experience, not to simply facilitate a narrow commercial exchange as part of that. When you're a tourist, I'm sure you're all identifying with this. If you buy an ice cream when you're a tourist, it's part of your tourist experience of that particular space. In fact, a lot of commercial activity in tourist areas, and people don't realise this, is if you go and buy a shirt or a ring or a bracelet when you're a tourist, it's not just because you like that shirt or that ring. You're buying a memento of your experience in that place, and it becomes a seamless part of your total experience, a reminder of that particular experience. And this is one of the hardest hurdles to get merchants over, is that people attract people. So if you build these three sectors of your economy, this will look after itself. This will automatically start to happen. And more of these people will transfer over into this sector. Now, if you take that kind of an approach, one of the things you want to do is to get people to park as far away from your shop as possible.